had me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Good afternoon, everybody. 5 o'clock on a Friday. Time for another episode of Cello Chat. Always look forward to this, and I'm very much looking forward to today's discussion as well with Patricia Ryan. Patty, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm very much looking forward to this. Audience members, the Julia Floberg, who was a guest last fall, was the first of the members of the Delphia Quartet that I've gotten to have on as a guest. And Patty is another member. And so that's how I first, well, not actually the first time I ran across your name. We'll maybe talk about your podcast as well and its clever title.
Yeah.
But it's so fun to get more and more connected with the world of cello players. There are a lot of very cool cello players out there.
Yeah. Well, it's a great instrument. So
it is. Yeah. What can we say, right?
Yeah.
So would you start by telling about your musical background? How'd you get to where you are today?
Sure. Well, I first was a pianist. Actually, I started piano at age 7, and it was through this piano studio that I discovered cello, because the last recital of the year was called the end of the year recital, and our teacher allowed outside strings or brass or ensembles to play. So if you played another instrument in addition to piano, you would be able to play and do collaborative music. So I was put, maybe within my first or second year of playing piano, I was put in a piano trio with my sister who played violin, and they brought a friend who played cello. And that was my first introduction, was in a chamber music setting. And I just fell in love with the tone, and I just thought it was such a beautiful instrument. And of course, after listening to my older sister playing a screechy violin, after a while, you kind of get like, I want something a little bit more mellow. So I asked my parents if I could play cello. And they said, well, what about the violin? Your sister has a couple old half-size instruments. You can maybe, come on. And I said, no, I really want to play cello. That seems like that's the sound I want. And my dad said, okay, as long as you don't quit, you can play the cello. And then my joke is then, well, I've not quit. So that's how I got started. I started at age 9 and worked my way through all the youth symphonies and tried to do a little bit of chamber music here and there with other, like my sister's violin studio maybe needed a cellist, so I'd play in the string quartet, like on a kleine Nacht music or something like that. And I went through all the high school orchestras in the San Diego based area. So I was in the San Diego Youth Symphony and ended up becoming principal cello for that. And that was a bit of a transformative experience for me, because I had this moment where I was actually sitting in third chair, but the principal was absent. And so I was pushed forward, and we were playing Capriccio Espagnol by Rimsky-Korsakov, and there's a cello solo. Oh. And I kind of off the fly just played it, and then everyone kind of clapped in the orchestra because it sounded well. And so and that was and then after that I became principal. And so that proved to me that, hey, maybe this is something I could do. And I kind of recognized that amongst all my other colleagues who were in high school with me and doing all kinds of other sciences or English or things like that, I sort of recognized that I might have had a little bit of an edge when it came to music compared to my friends. And so I decided within my last year of high school to apply for schools. And I ended up going to the USC Thornton School of Music on a full scholarship. And I was studying with Nathaniel Rosen, and then he left the school after my freshman year. And I then continued studies with Alexander Suleiman, after which then I got my first master's degree at San Francisco Conservatory with Jean-Michel Fontenot as my professor. And I actually ended up doing 2 degrees there. I did a master's of music, and I then also did an artistic certificate in chamber music. So that's 4 years that I spent there. And after that, I was in search of a string quartet and string quartet members. So I decided to apply for Rice University to for another master's program, specifically to study with Norman Fisher, because I had met him along the ways through Tanglewood and through Mark Sokol, who was his colleague in the Concord String Quartet, who also was a teacher, my main chamber music teacher at San Francisco Conservatory. And I knew that he knew the world of chamber music. So I wanted to study with him and get his knowledge. So then I completed a second master's at Rice University, after which then I fell into the laps of the Artaria String Quartet, who needed a cellist right at that same moment that I was graduating.
Nice.
And long story short, I moved to the Twin Cities and I've been here since. So if that's a complete origin story.
That's terrific. Well, and let's see, I'm just thinking about willingness to travel, to play. So you started out in California and then did some studies in Texas, and now you're in Minnesota, but you also go to the East Coast or have gone as well.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of my summers were spent on the East Coast. all the festival, like Tanglewood, for instance. I also went to Norfolk Chamber Music Summer Festival. And also a little bit of Spoleto as well. So in South Carolina, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, so I feel like I spent a lot of time in the East Coast as well. And it's interesting to get that coastal difference of how music's approached. And I think that really has influenced some of my musicianship.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Let's segue into that.
Sure.
I really like your website is overall, I like your website, and there's a lot of opportunities on it to see how you are as a performer and a chamber musician, the ensembles that you're involved in, videos and the like. But under the tab for teaching, I like your teaching philosophy. I mean, it seems very thoughtful. I mean, sometimes it's not easy to put into words this thing of not only music, but the process of learning and teaching music, and the relationship between music and the student, and the trust involved and the nurturing as the teacher. So maybe in whatever order you want to answer them, I'm curious about two things: how your own approach to teaching is, how it's like that of your teachers, and how it's your own. Let's actually start with that.
Sure.
What's your approach to teaching?
Oh, well, I'm highly influenced by, I'd say, probably Jean-Michel Fontenot and Norman Fisher as pedagogues. I also am influenced by Paul Cantor, violinist faculty at Rice University. These are some of the teachers that I have found to have been the clearest and the most nurturing for me, for myself. I guess I should also add Mark Sokol, but he has now passed, unfortunately. But there's something about the level of dedication that they have for their students and willingness to try to understand it from their perspective that I particularly want to emulate with my students. And I feel like that cello and chamber music, whatever element, music theory, all of it is approachable. It's just the gateway is the job of the teacher. How do we get the student to have that click moment of, oh, I get it, and then let's build on that? And that is actually what really excites me about being a teacher, is witnessing those click moments and then saying, oh, good, okay, let's keep going. Okay, now that you understand that, then this will add up later. That really just gets me going a bit. Yeah.
All right. Well, okay, then to the other question, as far as the one I ask everybody about motivating students. And of course, there are some that come in with plenty of fire and they don't need additional guidance from us as to how to practice as often as they feel like they ought to, or know that they would benefit from. Mm-hmm. And clearly, I mean, it's like leading by example is great to show the level of enthusiasm for cello and for music and for playing it. But what else is in your kind of just approach for when a student does need help or would benefit from kind of learning how to love the process of learning and practicing more?
Sure. Well, I just say first and foremost, what helps me is a deadline. So if there's a concert coming up or if there's some kind of performance opportunity, then that kind of kicks me in the butt a little bit. But in getting the cello out of the case and sitting down and taking that time to really dive into music, my suggestion is to try to find the game in what you're looking at. What is the puzzle that you're trying to figure out? Is it a technical one where there's maybe a little bit of a coordination issue between the right hand and the left hand? Is there a specific stroke that you're struggling with and trying to say, okay, well, what is it in my bow that's not getting that stroke right? Am I gripping my hand too hard, or am I not activating my lower back? Little tactics like that. Of course, there's always rhythms for that kind of left hand, right hand coordination, or just simply, finding a pitch from out of nowhere. But there's all these like little tricks that you have in your bag. But if you find yourself struggling and hitting your head against a brick wall, move on. That's my best advice. Move on, find another puzzle to look at. And then or just stand up and get a drink of water. Even just a complete distraction, pet your cat. I mean, just do something completely different, because what I've found for myself is that the more that I can stimulate my brain to go from one thing to the next, going back to it and revisiting it is actually more of a refreshing look than just kind of stewing there and thinking, oh gosh, I'm not good enough. How come this isn't working for me? It will. It just takes a little bit of time, and it's a mental game more than anything else.
It's a mental game. That's an excellent point. Yeah. All right. Terrific. Let's see. So you are involved in a lot of ensembles of different types, which is great. And let's see, they are a mix too. Clearly, there are a couple of them that demonstrate that you have strong fondness for contemporary music, the Kinetic Ensemble and the Wave Chamber Collective. Yeah. So if you would talk a bit about both of those ensembles and what it is that you like about contemporary music.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, I think it's special to be a performer these days, because you are in the middle of a lineage of musicians and also a lineage of relationships to composers that I see it as inheriting from my predecessors. For instance, this is kind of a tangent, but I feel a particular onus to carry on the music of George Rockberg, because Rockberg and the Concord String Quartet, which is where Mark Sokol and Andrew Jennings and Norm Fisher come in, they forged a very strong bond and premiered his third string quartet, and there's a long lineage of that kind of history. So I feel as a disciple of them to also do the same thing, because I also think his music's wonderful. So now looking at myself, I feel that it's important to create those relationships with composers, because there's so much brand new music that's being produced that's innovative and excellent, and something that no one's ever heard before, which to me is exciting. I mean, I love Beethoven, don't get me wrong, but there's something about taking up a piece of music for the first time, really analyzing it and trying to make it your own, that I get really excited about. And also forging those relationships with composers, because not only are they just friends to have, but also you can help influence them to then hopefully create something really great. I mean, not that eventually over time, right? Like the Britten and the Rostropovich connection, or Shostakovich and Rostropovich, they really played off of each other a lot. And so with Kinetic Ensemble, for instance, and based in Houston, it was a group that stemmed from Rice University, but now has its own, how many, 16 legs, I guess, I don't know, 16 piece or 632, I guess. And so what's been so unique about that ensemble is that they are always very conscious of what they program, and they respect the classics, but they also want to push forward and commission so many premieres. And it's always a fresh look at the repertoire, and specifically the string orchestra repertoire that, you don't always hear on a normal basis. And also the fact that it's a conductorless ensemble, and that it's 16 musicians on stage being able to do this without a conductor, to me is just like, that's just like chamber music overload almost, but a lot of fun. And also, of course, we're all friends. So that kind of is Kinetic's role in my life, is that kind of bigger ensemble. With 10th Wave Chamber Music Collective, based in the Twin Cities here, they do forge a lot of unique performance experiences, because they not just play it in the concert hall, but they go out and try to get to the audience rather than ask the audience to come to us. And I think that is something that really excites me as well, because we are actively going in and trying to get this music showcased. Also, I get an opportunity to play with woodwinds and other instruments, piano more, so percussion. So it like, for instance, I performed 21 by Andy Akiho, which involved, I don't know if you're familiar with this piece. It's marimba and cello, but the marimba also has a tambourine on the left, and the cellist has to do a loop pedal on the left foot and a bass drum or a kick drum on the right foot while playing. Of course, it's not easy. That was probably one of the more challenging pieces I've ever had to play, but it extended my technique. And that's where I really value those experiences that I have with 10th Wave.
Nice. Let's see. So when you play contemporary music, there'll be times when a living composer will write something that initially seems maybe not playable, or certainly unidiomatic. And it can be like what you say, a game. It can be a fun challenge to try and figure out, how am I going to do that successfully? One of the things I'm wondering about is, since you are also an arranger, and not just a few arrangements, but I think I estimated about 50 that you list on your website, which is really neat. A bunch of classical and a bunch of popular, just a nice variety of things. How has kind of your exposure to all the things that the cello can do, did that help to influence you in the first place to start doing the arranging, or does it stay kind of at the forefront of your brain when you're thinking about what the possibilities are as you arrange?
Sure. First and foremost, I should admit that I kind of cheat in a way, because I have perfect pitch. So arranging for me is actually pretty easy. In some ways, it's easy because I can just pick notes and plop them on the manuscript. I don't have to kind of figure out the theory so much. I mean, I know the theory because I have perfect pitch too, but so some of that is somewhat taken care of. The arranging part for me is I have this tactile memory or feeling of what notes would fit well in my hand, in my left hand, or maybe in my right hand if it's and that's where I try to make it as idiomatic as possible. I bet some of my Delphia colleagues would maybe laugh at me, because some of my arrangements are very challenging.
All right.
And I think early on when I started doing some of these, I felt like I had not something to prove, but I wanted to prove that the cello could do anything. And so there's a lot of double stops. There's a lot of leaps, those sorts of things. But yeah, I mean, I also think that there's a lot of textural things that I've taken away from some of my contemporary music, making sure that not two timbres collide with one another, or that they're either purposefully separate or purposefully together. And that probably comes in play as well, being a chamber musician, but just trying to find the complementary or the distant kind of textures.
Right. So your there's a recording you play one of the Britain suites with beautiful sound on
Oh, thank you.
one of the clips on your website. And that certainly, I mean, composers like Britain, I mean, there are quite a number of them, not just he, but as far as people who were able to certainly think outside of what is just listed in your regular orchestration and arranging books as to what the cello can do. But you mentioned also the chamber music component of it. And I have to say, my own impression from those videos, I was particularly struck by the chamber music playing. You really look like you're enjoying the ability to plug into the other people on the stage, and also to switch hats like we have to do quickly. I mean, not just the cellos, but certainly cello also has to, now we're the bass line, now we're an inner voice, now we've got the melody. And when you can just change aspects on a dime, I mean, not only is that really important for the success, really high level success for the audience, but man, that's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's the thrill. Yeah, really.
So,
No, I love. Oh yeah, please. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I think you know where I'm going with this. What is, what else drew you to chamber music or keeps you engaged as much as you are in particularly chamber music playing?
Yeah. What drew me to chamber music, or specifically even string quartet, I just philosophically love this idea that it's the Enlightenment concept of every voice is equal. Every person has a democratic say. There's no one is not important. Everyone is important. So the conceptual idea of it to me already just is like great. I'm, and not to say anything wrong with playing as a soloist, nothing wrong to say as playing as a orchestral member. Those are great too. And I also miss sometimes doing more of those things, even now that I've somewhat chosen a route of chamber music. But I conceptually overall just love that. And I've also, when I was a student, observed that a lot of my faculty members were chamber musicians. And I thought, well, that's the jack of all trades. You have to be a soloist. You have to be an orchestral member. You have to also collaborate and be a good supportive musician to someone. And I aspired to be like my teachers at the time. So I love the feeling of playing my own part, but fusing that with another person's part at the same time. And I always like to think of myself, and my role specifically as a cellist is, how can I help? How can I help the second violin at this moment? How can I help the viola? What's the first violin doing? And how is that conversation happening between the first and the viola? What am I doing to support that? And I think a lot of my beginning Artaria Chamber Music School students might kind of see a bass line as very boring. And I try to convince them, no, do you understand that you're inspiring these guys? You don't make the first violin work too hard. You have to give more, and then that's the reward in itself, is producing a beautiful tone that shapes and changes color and, directs someone else in the group to do something fantastic. So I mean, that's just me as a chamber musician, I guess. I just love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Have you ever happened to see there was a interview series, maybe it wasn't too much of a series, but I remember there was at least one episode that really stood out that the Smithsonian put together, and it was a number of chamber musicians being interviewed, but Lynn Harrell's description of chamber music at its best reminds me, or what you were just saying reminded me of what he had to say on it. And it's a lot like acting too, when people kind of strive to be best supporting actor or actress, and like, how can my part best set up this person for success? It really is distinctive, and it never gets old, does it?
No, because that's the connection to composers now, because every composer has a different, fresh view of, let's say, the string quartet, right? Yeah. So the roles always change, the function always changes, and that's what makes it exciting.
Very nice. Now, I'm just curious, do you attribute like your starting out as a pianist, I know like a number of people who arrange or compose do so initially at the piano. And then just also, not everybody obviously who has perfect pitch started out as a pianist, but that those notes being right in front of you and categorical that way. How much of your having started out as a pianist do you think has influenced your path despite switching and not quitting the cello?
Oh, I think it was incredibly formative. In California specifically, there is the Certificate of Merit program, or there used to be in the Music Teachers Association, and that was very strong in piano, not so much in strings for whatever reason. But piano is always like music theory and aural skills are taught at a very early age, and I was a beneficiary of that. Yeah, and so I actually I credit my early piano teacher, or the one piano teacher really, for gifting me with perfect pitch, because whatever science is still, the jury's out for the science behind perfect pitch, but I believe that it's something that everyone is born with, and it's whether it's trained or not. And so I remember there's certain very vivid memories of her training certain pitches for me to then regurgitate back, and then it kind of clicked one day, sort of thing. But regardless, piano has incredibly influenced me, and yes, in some of my arranging, just in understanding chordal structures, understanding how harmonies shift from one thing to the next. In the arranging, though, it is a little bit more of a tactile cello thing, because I am trying to be very aware of what is comfortable and what is uncomfortable. But yeah, piano in general, just overall as a concept of me understanding music, has just been the bedrock for my understanding. And I highly recommend it to any if anyone's trying to get their kid to start, I would say, please, just start on piano, and then, have them go find their instrument outside of that.
Right. Or even later on to improve your piano chops is good for you too.
Well, yeah, and that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to start cello, is I wanted to improve my left-hand bass line.
Right.
And I ended up playing piano for about 8 years. So it wasn't like I just dropped it I played for quite a bit of time.
Excellent. Okay, what do you have? What irons in the fire for 2023? Upcoming projects, concerts? What do you have?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So actually really soon, about this weekend, Artaria String Quartet is doing our 3rd series concert, and it's a huge program. It's Mendelssohn Opus 44 #1. Nice. My former colleague Joe Tien, String Quartet #1. We're also performing with baritone Tommy Glass, who is an incredible baritone singer, and we're doing Barber's Dover Beach, and then finishing with Bartok 4. So it's like 1-2 punch everywhere. So that's coming up this coming weekend. After that, I'm doing some traveling for Kinetic Ensemble in early March, and performing down there in Houston. And tagging on to that is a concert in San Antonio, where I'm going to be performing, and I'm excited to do this, the Walker Cello Sonata, which I've never learned before. Have you played it?
No.
Yeah, it's not easy. But it's a fulfilling piece, and I think there's a lot of great things in there. And for those who don't know George Walker, he was somewhat of a contemporary of Samuel Barber, and has beautiful music out there. So that's some upcoming concerts, and then with 10th Wave, there may be some upcoming. They're still kind of in the works. With Delphia, we've been doing the class notes, I think, as Julia had mentioned, class notes with NPR, where we go in and play concerts for and showcase the cello quartet and what it can do to the Minneapolis and St. Paul regional area. And otherwise, as far as I can see in the current moment, other than that, my summer plans involve Stringwood Chamber Music Festival, which is the Artaria String Quartet summer program. So enrollment is open currently. So
outstanding. All right. Well, I sure hope that on April 22nd that the Delphia Cello Quartet plays some of your arrangements.
Yeah.
Are any of them available if people want them? How do they get them?
Yes, they are somewhat on, oh gosh, what's it called? Sheet Music Plus.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, but I'd prefer maybe if you just contact me.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, yeah. And that's just pryancello@gmail.com.
Tremendous, tremendous. Well, thanks so much. This has been really great visiting with
Yeah.
you, Patty, and best of luck with everything, all that you're involved in, the teaching, the playing. It is sure a great instrument that we play, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and it's so versatile. I mean, that's the reason why I can play in so many groups, is that everyone needs a cellist. So, it's just where you find your niche. Yeah.
Tremendous. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much again. And to all of you out there, happy practicing all weekend. And we'll see you this time next week. Take care.